I'm quite excited to be here with such an esteemed panel. And what maybe I'll do is I'll get each of the panelists to introduce themselves, give a little background, and then we'll begin. So Wyle, why don't we start with you?
Great start, thank you. So my name is Wyle Baoween. I am the CEO of HRX Technology. We do something called blind recruitment, which is basically removing names, any indication to gender or background that could lead to bias in the screening process in hiring. I am an engineer. I have an MBA. I worked in consulting, process improvement, and marine transportation and construction for a long time, and I did the recruitment technology. I come from Yemen. I came here to Canada 5 years ago, and yeah, that's me.
Want me to go next?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm not going to tell you my history because it's way too long. I'm the old woman here. My name's Fiona Macfarlane, and my day job is leading EY's British Columbia practice. And my night job is I'm the firm's Chief Inclusiveness Officer. And that's an external role, and it's advocacy, trying to get inclusion onto the board and CEO agenda as a legitimate business issue. And I'm a lawyer by background.
My name is Veronica Finch. I am a Global Diversity and Inclusion Manager at Microsoft. I support the Windows and Devices Group, which is the largest engineering sort of function within Microsoft. And before that, I was a Human Resources Officer for the United States Army. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shannon Rodgers, and I'm the President and General Counsel of Global Relay. And Global Relay is a local tech company. We started off with 4 employees. I was employee number 4. And today we're over 400 employees with 7 offices worldwide and about 20,000 customers. So we're one of the tech companies in BC that's sort of grown from nothing to being a worldwide player.
Great, that's fantastic. And my name is Greg Caws. I'm going to be your moderator. I'm the president of the Premier's Technology Council, which is a group of CEOs and leaders that provide advice directly to government about technology. It's recognized as being extraordinarily important to the province. We're here at a wonderful summit, over 5,000 people here. And I just noticed 1,500 kids pour out as well. So let's begin. So the purpose of today is to talk about unconscious bias, which is a very, very interesting topic. It goes beyond gender and age. It includes names, height, weight, parental status, ethnicity, sexual orientation, educational background, perceived class, and that's just to begin. So basically, we're going to try and do a deep dive here in how we can recognize, move forward, and ultimately pass these biases so that we can create diverse and inclusive workplaces. So I'm going to give us a little definition that I pulled off from of diversity, unconscious bias, from the University of California, San Francisco, just so we all have a frame of reference as to what that is. So unconscious biases are social stereotypes about certain groups of people that individuals form outside of their own conscious awareness. So you have these unconscious beliefs, and your unconscious biases are actually far more prevalent than your conscious biases that you would have in your head. So they tend to pop out in real time. And it causes, the basis of this is the instantaneous decisions that go on your head. And most of the time, these are not rational decisions. It's like a knee-jerk reaction. So I'm going to do a little thought experiment here, and all of you can think about this. And you got to find the answer. It's a math problem, okay? So it's basic math. It involves addition and subtraction, so I'm sure you'll be good at it. Okay, so if a ball and a bat cost $1.10, okay, so the ball and the bat cost $1.10, and the bat costs $1 more than the ball, how much does the ball cost? Okay, okay. So 50% of master's level university students get this question wrong. The answer is 5 cents. The football costs 5 cents, because that's $1 more. Most of us instantaneously make the decision that it's 10 cents. So we tend to choose groups and things based on what we're familiar with. And there's a tendency to favor groups that tend to be more powerful and more aligned with ourselves. This is called unconscious bias. So, for example, there's a greater likelihood that you're nodding your head right now because I'm a male. This is just statistical. So what we're going to do now is we're going to begin, and I'm going to try and make this session very interactive. So rather than us sitting up here and pontificating about how much we know, we'd like to have a two-way conversation. So I'm going to start with Fiona, okay? And so here we go. So we've been preparing for this for months. So this is it. All our lives have led to this moment. So despite the best intentions, technology and other businesses have not made the improvements in progressing women and minorities and other outsider groups into the C-suite and onto boards. And this is in spite of the fact that women have been awarded half the undergraduate degrees in Canada for over 3 decades. So Fiona, you have an analogy that's informed by the learning Ernst & Young has gleaned from over 20 years on your diversity and inclusion journey that might be helpful in trying to understand why we have not been successful enough.
Okay. Well, at EY, we've been on this diversity and inclusion journey in Canada. We started with gender in about 1993, and we've had some success. Last year, our partner promotions were 46% female, and the year before it was 50%. So we've made a lot of progress. And what we've learned is that it's all about culture and leadership. And so my analogy is, it's like the corporate world is like a saltwater stream. And for decades, everything that swam in it was a salmon. And then my generation came along 3 decades ago, and we were the little freshwater fish. And we jumped into the stream, and we were swimming around. And after a while, the organizations realized these little freshwater fish aren't doing too well. So they outfitted us with oxygen tanks. They strapped them to our gills, and we swam around, and it was heavier, and we could breathe a bit better, but we could still see the salmon swimming upstream. So we said, well, if they can swim upstream, it must be me, must be my swimming ability. So we lost confidence, and many freshwater fish exited the corporate stream. And the challenge with it is that to the salmon, it's just water, and to the freshwater fish, it's just water. The salt crystals that are inside the stream are invisible, but they kill everything that's not a salmon. And I joke that I am a salmon in stilettos. Like, I'm white male. I can interrupt the best of you. So, but that maybe was practical when there were very few women coming into the workforce. It's not practical now, and it's actually losing the benefit of all that diversity. And so, my generation, we were kind of fixed. We were coached in how to behave white male. I can remember being told, you have to learn to golf. And I've tried it twice, and I hated both times. So, and there was another time where, the partner, with the best of intentions, he said to me, Fiona, you really need to be more authoritative in client meetings. So I suggest you lean forward, put your elbows on the table, and just speak up. And so I can remember sitting there in those meetings thinking, keep your elbows on the table, keep your elbows on the table. And you really do not perform at your best if you can't be yourself. And that doesn't matter who you are, men, women, whatever groups you're from. And so we have to desalinate the water. And that's why, if water is equivalent to culture, that's why we've made so little progress, because we keep throwing tons of freshwater fish into the stream and then wondering why they're not getting upstream. So, so we have to change the conversation, and I think it is around leadership and culture and desalinating it. And so at EY, we use that analogy, and we're looking for evidence of salt crystals. And then we're trying to work around them so that the salt crystals, are removed from our processes, anything that results in the success of our people.
That's very interesting. So Veronica, maybe given your experience in Microsoft, which is a huge, diverse part of Cascadia, welcome it's Veronica's first time to Vancouver. So, yeah.
It's really horrible here.
So what can companies do to develop a more diverse and inclusive environment?
Yeah, I think the first part of that is really understanding that diversity and inclusion are different things and that they work together. And so a company needs to understand that diversity takes a number of different forms. It can be gender, race and ethnicity. It can be introversion versus extroversion, different abilities. So really getting clarity on how diversity shows up and where it has value, which is pretty much all the time. The next piece is the inclusion part. And that's the piece that deals with leveraging the diversity that's present. I have an analogy that I like to use that is a basketball team. So if you're watching a game and you see the point guard with the ball, can you imagine how different the game would look if the point guard never passed the ball to any players, right? And so in that circumstance, it wouldn't matter how great the rest of the team was or how great the point guard was if they're not able to really collaborate, to partner, and to work together to win the game. And so I think that's kind of a fun analogy to think about how inclusion can show up. The next piece, I think, is really understanding that there are multiple levers that a corporation or a business needs to manipulate in order to drive a sustainable change within a culture. So the first piece is understanding how does diversity support the mission of a company? And for Microsoft, our mission statement is generally to empower billions of people around the planet to be more productive with our devices and services. And so because our customers are global, they use our products in different ways and for different things, it's really critical that our workforce reflects the diversity of our customer, and so that's not lost on us. The next piece I would say is that inclusive culture. So how do you create a welcoming environment for all of your employees? How do you desalinate the water? And I think there's a number of different ways that you can do that. The biggest way is by modeling inclusive behaviors. So doing things like ensuring all voices are heard. If you're at a meeting and you realize one person keeps getting cut off or can't get a word in edgewise, are you modeling an inclusive behavior by pointing that out or inviting the person and giving them the time and space to speak? And so there are a number of there's 10 different inclusive behaviors that we outline as these are our go-tos. This is what we think inclusion looks like. And now we're going to teach you what that looks like in practice, because I think that's the part that gets tricky. People are inherently good and want to do the right thing, but they don't always 100% know where bias shows up or inclusion or lack of exclusion shows up, and then how to combat it. The next piece that I would say is really developing your people. If they're feeling welcomed, they can do their best work, and if they're happy, they want to stay. So if you've done all this work to recruit diverse individuals, it's important that they remain at your company so that you can really, again, leverage that diversity of thought and perspective. Right. And then finally, expanding the pipeline. We know that there are a ton of really great sources of rich talent, and I think companies generally know that in tech especially, we've got to get more creative about where we're finding talent. We can't go to the same 3 wells that we go to draw from that. So really it's about building new pipelines, finding other sources of smart, creative, diversity of thought, and then hopefully investing in youth programs and STEM programs to give back to the community. So you're not just taking, you're also nurturing the next generation of talent.
Okay, thanks very much. There's not a test on this later?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, good. Okay.
Can you tell this is what I do?
We'll be passing out, and you won't be able to get out otherwise. So, but Shannon, as a leader and president of a very fast-growing technology company, what strategies have you used to help establish and maintain a culture where there's diversity and where it is as free as possible from unconscious bias?
Right. So to put it in context, we're a Vancouver tech company with about 400 people. And it's really divided, quite typical profile of a tech company. About 50% are on the development side, and 50% are on the service side. So you're already dealing with very different personalities and type of person that you hire in the roles for tech versus what you want it's a cloud service, so customer facing. We deal with banks, so you're quite a professional front-facing team. So you already are dealing with sort of different personalities in there. And then, as you say, there's this unconscious bias or hidden choices that we make. And so I think the first thing that we need to do is just be aware of them. Mm-hmm. And once you're aware of them, then you can take that recognition and start to make little shifts, little pivots, or just little ways of opening the door to change the way people think about their colleagues. And you might think you're being diverse, but if you really go a bit deeper, you still find biases in there. And I had two examples that I wanted to tell you about. The first one, in 2015, it was January, we were having our typical annual strategic planning meeting, and we were all sitting around the boardroom, and it was all the main global relay executives and management. And so everyone's going around saying, okay, we want to release these products this year, we want to do this, we want to do that. And when it was my turn, I added one in there and said, we have to hire more women. And we have quite a few women at Global Relay, but just not enough in the senior roles. I happen to be our president, but the sort of the next group down, it was almost all males. So, and everyone kind of turned to me and said, well, Shannon, it's not like we have a bias against women. We're just trying to hire talent. And again, typical of a Vancouver tech company, we're all just so desperate for talent. Mm-hmm. You're not really looking like, oh, I want a male over a female. You're just like, find me some smart people, and we can't even fill the roles we have. So we didn't think there was any bias there. But what was really interesting is just by putting it out to the room, and I've got a great team, I think it changed the way people were thinking. I don't think it was a fluke. That year we ended up hiring a tremendous amount of women, in fact, more women than men in senior roles. And it wasn't just that it wasn't just that we hired more. It was also that every time we hired another woman, I would get a ping or a phone call. Someone would be really proud and they would say, I just got us another one. And so it almost became, it was great. And it became a celebration on top. So we didn't think we had any bias, just by doing a little open the door, a shift, it changed and interesting things happened. And the second example I wanted to give is, you might be familiar if you're from here, Global Relay runs the Global Relay Gastown Grand Prix bike race every July. And it's a criterion cycling event. And so we first did it, we were approached by Gastown to take up the cause about 6 years ago. And we're an archiving company. We didn't know anything about cycling. So we really relied on the cycling community and the event planners to tell us how to run it. And then our staff, we sponsored it and ran it. So the first year, one of the things you have to figure out is the prize purse. So we decided we wanted to have the biggest prize purse in North America. It's an international race and it's really prestigious. So we went out and someone came back and said, okay, the biggest prize purse for the guys is 15 grand for first place. And for women, it's 8 grand. And I remember thinking, like, the guys are almost double the girls. We can't do that. Like, I'm a woman president of a tech company. I can't make the prize purse half. And then, and same with like my fellow colleagues. We all agreed, but they convinced us. They're like, no. Are you kidding? The women normally get like 2 grand. They're gonna be so happy getting 8. God. So in the first year, we kind of went, oh, okay. We went along with it. I mean, there was all sorts of things we were trying to figure out. In year 2, once we figured out how to run it, it was one of the first things we did. And I guess I'd also had a chance to talk to some of the people that were in it, and there were athletes like Alison Saidor and Gina Grain, like top international Canadian athletes, Olympians. And you realize these women deserve just as much. So in year 2, we raised the prize purse to make it even for men and women for first, second, third place, et cetera. And then immediately what happened, again, you just changed something slightly, but And then the rest of BC Super Week, which is the cycling races that are on throughout BC that week, everyone immediately raised their prize purse to be even for men and women. And then what happened is the word got out, and there was some reporters wrote on it. And from what I understand, almost every single criterium in North America for the cycling community moved the women's prize purses to be equal to the men. Yeah. So it's a really neat example of a little thing that we didn't even really know what we were doing running this race, and you open the little door, you communicate it, and it changes it in really interesting ways. So anyway, that's all to say. It's important to have diversity, and the more ways you can think about going about it, opening doors. Can I say one more thing, or do I?
No.
Time?
Go ahead.
I just thought of another. The other one too is that being a tech company, the other bias we have, like those were two examples, gender. But one of the big ones in tech community is age. So you get all these young, really energetic people coming in the door. They're excited to build new things, and obviously you need that. Most of the tech companies made up of it. But the one thing that I've learned over time is it's equally important to make sure that you hire senior people. The difference, when we were small, you can compete in the little SMB space, small and medium business space. But as you grow, and we try and now win the biggest banks in the world and governments and that sort of thing, you can't build an enterprise platform. You can't compete at those levels without people who have been through the ringer, who've been in the war zone, who have had that experience. Don't get caught up in the fancy little app, but really want to go build a big platform. Our two more senior developers are in their 60s, and one of them I think worked for NASA, and one worked for Thomson Reuters in the financial sector. And if you didn't have those type of people that could see the whole project through and the bigger pieces, and really build up a platform, then we would have never been able to take that next leap to go into the enterprise space. So that's, I think, one of the other biases that we really need to make a conscious effort if you really want to have that competitive advantage to compete.
Yeah, age is certainly a huge factor. So Wyle, I'm going to pass the last question to you, and then what we're going to do is we're going to reach out into the audience. So you have to put your thinking caps on, and we have fantastic experts here, and we're going to begin a dialogue, because I just don't want it to be us up here talking at you. So while we've been speaking a lot about unconscious bias in terms of awareness, training, and culture, but what about the systems and processes that organizations have in place? Where does bias present itself in our processes, and does technology have a role to play?
Absolutely. So before I talk about, I would like to start with an example to show how important technology is in addressing the bias that exists in our processes. So imagine that you want tickets to travel anywhere around the world. I give you a list of 200 countries, and I ask you to objectively go through them, and you have 24 hours to come back to me and tell me where you want to go. Now, if your brain works like my brain, I can't do that. I have to check the weather, which city, beach or not, the food, check with my wife. It's a lot of discussion for 200 countries. So most probably what I will do, I will just see really 10 of them. I would like to go to Spain. I love Spain. VG looks really cool. I'd like to go there. And it's all based on perceptions, what I heard in the media, what my friends told me. A country in Africa, there are a lot of issues there. Maybe I shouldn't go there. I have no idea if it's safe or not. I'm just like making really quick shortcuts to make that decision. So that's unconscious bias. And that's how we process large amount of information in very short time, or when we multitask, right? And it's okay when you decide where you want to travel to use your unconscious bias, but it's not okay when you are making decisions impacting people. They often say organizations and people who think they are objective often have worse outcomes. We think we are objective, We think we are hiring the best talent. We think that we don't see race or gender. Reality is we do. It's how our brains work. So that's bias that exists. And I'll give you some examples about biases, and I will talk about recruitment that exists in recruitment. And even if you have the best trained people on unconscious bias, they might find it very hard to overcome their biases when they do these processes. So for example, job postings. Research show that women and men react differently to job postings. On average, women apply if they have 90% or above of the qualifications, men apply with 50. It's even worse when the industry or the field is dominated by male. So that's a biased process. Here you go, out of the gate. Referrals, they keep bringing the same type of people that you have. Interviews, if you don't really spend time to structure and think about your interview, there's a huge opportunity for bias to get in the interview process. And then the last one, resume evaluations. We have small teams of recruiters in our organizations. They hire a lot of people. There is a lot of pressure on them. There are some roles that are not really important, and they receive hundreds of resumes. So the way they make their decisions is exactly how I chose the countries I would like to go to. Just really quick, let me get through the 500 and get 5 of them, and then I will look at them objectively. So these are the biases that exist in processes. And that's where I think technology can change that. At HRX, we do interesting things with our clients. We are looking to redesign the job posting process. I hate that process. My vision is to remove that process altogether. But for now, we have to play with what we have. So we work on that. And then resume evaluation, we remove the name, the gender, any indication to your background that could lead to bias in the process. Evaluating the candidates, we use AI, we use big data to validate candidates. So these are the things that we do at HRX, and I truly believe that we are in just perfect place, perfect time to do what we are doing at HRX. There is a lot of attention to unconscious bias. A lot of people talk about it. There are many leaders in the city, from government and from business, who believe this should be addressed. We have 2 large clients. We have many more that are really interested in what we do. And I was chatting with Greg earlier. The UK government announced last year that by 2020, for all public service agencies, they will implement blind recruitment to make the process fair. So yeah, that's how we can use technology to address unconscious bias.
Yeah, I know, and this is an extraordinarily interesting topic, mainly because it revolves around all that instantaneous stuff we've learned all our lives. I just have a couple of observations, and I'm going to throw these out to you, and you can figure out whether it's true or not. So nowadays, to be young is to be experienced. So if you're using technology, the young are experienced. The millennials now that are coming through are challenging the mainstream. So the millennials are actually the new mainstream. In California, Latinos are actually the largest ethnic group by far. Today, in our university and college system, there's more women than men by far getting degrees. So there's all sorts of things happening here with the diversity, with the sort of bias agenda that sort of flip things on their head. And I've learned a few things about this. Honestly, I am the Google king of unconscious bias. I know it all. So one of the things that I learned, which is extraordinarily important, is you actually need to deliberately slow down your decision making.
Yeah.
So you know how you flash up that big email as a retort, and then you don't hit the send button, you actually wait a day and then look at the email and you go, wow, I'm glad I didn't send that? Apply that thought process to your decision making, because it will actually affect what the outcomes are. You also need to look at your decision process and reconsider it actively. So if you have your habits of over years of making decisions, think about it and rejig them to take into account some of the stuff that we've learned here today. Have your peers monitor you. In other words, have someone looking over your shoulder. That can be very, very helpful. These are some ways that you can actually deal with unconscious bias. Also be aware that it is unconscious, so you need to take active steps. You know, there's a difference between diversity and inclusiveness. Inclusiveness is an action where you're actually taking, you know, a step to do something about it. So it requires that. So maybe what I could do is open it up to the floor here, and we've got a question here. I'll repeat it so you can just yell her out.
So I was just at another panel, and they were talking about how this one senior woman had seen all these junior guys going in. Sorry. She had noticed that a lot of junior business analysts were going in and having face-to-face with the CEOs. And she thought, well, isn't that odd? Why aren't I seeing any of the junior women business analysts going in and having... So she went and spoke to him at a meeting they were talking about. She said, why is that? And he said, well, no one's asked to have a face-to-face with me but these guys who felt that they had the right to go in there and asked for a face-to-face. And I thought, that's the cultural thing that we have to figure out how to change, because the CEO was saying, well, if you want to talk to me, come and talk to me, whereas a woman will say, you know, who wants to hear what I've got to say? I'll step back. Exactly. So I'm just wondering what you think about that.
I've got an example that was a real sort of awakening for me. A number of years ago, I was leading EY's tax practice for Canada, and it was $250 million and 800 professionals, and we would take the junior staff for a workshop. It was in Toronto. They came from all across the country, and we had about 160 of them. 65% were women, and 40% were minorities, and 99% of them had already had their CAs. So they were between 4 and 8 years out of university. And the exercise was to build a Connects bridge across the ballroom. And so the facilitator said, okay, everybody, I'd like you to go to your tables, and I'd like each table to come up with a leader, and I'd like the leaders to come to the front of the room. And so I'm sitting in the back there, and there were 11 tables, and you remember the demographics. Well, 9 white men walked to the front of the room. And I thought, oh my goodness, there goes my pension. And then I thought, well, that's just terrible. How can that be? There's no performance rating differentials. There's no salary differentials. It's just, they're the same. And then I thought about, you know, the conversation, if it had been a bunch of women at the table, it would have been, Veronica, you be the leader. No, Shannon, you be the leader. And then somebody would have said, Fiona, you be the leader. I'd go, okay. And I'd feel really good. And then I went to this young guy, who's a superstar Chinese guy, and I said, Winston, what happened to you? Why weren't you at the front of the room? And he said, well, I was a second year, I'm not a fourth year, because hierarchy is important. And white men, when they say, hey guys, who's going to be the leader? If nobody answers, they go, I'll do it. And it's not bad, it's not good, it's just different. And so that dynamic plays out every single day in our organizations. And it's an example of salt crystal, because you're expecting people to behave in a way that's not how they're socialized or behave. And so really, when I started, I said this is about culture and leadership. And the best leaders understand that people operate from different frames of reference and figure out how to get the best out of their people. If you treat them homogeneously, if that's such a word, then homogeneously, you lose out on all the diversity of talent. And that's why it's a salt crystal, and why the number of women that have come through our organizations just aren't making it to the top, because they get marginalized, sidelined, and they lose confidence. And it's like this vicious spiral. Because what happens is those 9 white guys go to the front of the room, the partners say, good chap, look at him, you know, great leadership skills. that builds that person's confidence. He gets more visibility, he gets better opportunities. The women, the minorities, the introverts, they start feeling worse and worse about themselves. They start becoming more and more marginalized. In the end, they leave, or they sit there in middle management or in support roles or whatever. They don't run businesses and they don't do the things that get you to the top.
Yeah.
So
it does require active leadership.
Yep.
And yeah, fire away.
Yeah, one thing that I would add is there's evidence that men and women are coached differently in a professional setting. So there's also a great TED Talk, it's called The Missing 33%. But the summary is that men and women generally are given different feedback for how to improve. So you'll find that men in general are given feedback to get more analytical skills or projects, visibility, a lot of the things that Fiona just mentioned, where women are frequently coached on the softer side, softer skills, adjust your tone, your communication style, things of that sort. So you can see how quickly, if that's compounded over time, and again, these managers don't necessarily realize that they're giving different feedback, they're really trying to be helpful, but they're coaching their employees in two completely different ways that ultimately affect outcomes in their career. So,
and there's another great little example on that. I asked a partner, what happens if a guy comes into your office and he's not dressed appropriately for a client meeting? And the partner said, I tell him to get the hell home and change. And I said, and if a woman comes in and she's dressed inappropriately, what would you do? I talk to HR.
Well,
so then you never can improve, right? You just, so.
Shannon?
Yeah, I mean, I think ours is a little bit different, again, being a technology company that's, we're not obviously as big as EY or Microsoft. I find, I mean, the biggest thing that I've done lately in that is, and especially today, and we're in Canada, but we're all affected by Trump and all of these things that are going on, that unconscious bias is actually less unconscious than, you keep hearing rumblings that it's popping out more explicitly. I've really made a conscious effort. I realize I'm a woman leader and that I need to, I have things like, we have like our Women in Technology, but I've tried very hard now, every time I get to speak in front of our staff. I guess it's both in little meetings that you have on a daily basis, but also when I get a chance and we're in our all hands type of meetings and bigger events, Christmas party, whatever it may be. I now always make sure that I take even like 3 minutes of whatever I'm saying and talk about diversity and our culture. I tell her when to look around, be proud of being at, Global Relay, that's a very diverse company, and just that, and I just always express, like, we have a zero tolerance policy for harassment of any sort, sexual harassment or any sort of bias and that sort of thing. So we try and keep the channels. We have a really good HR department too, so I'd like to think that we have good channels all the way around, but I've actually made a conscious effort that every time I get a speaking opportunity with our staff, I take a few minutes to remind everyone that we're proud of the culture we have and we all have to maintain it. The diversity is the key to competitive advantage, and so everyone helps sort of maintain that culture. Hopefully that rubs off. I get a lot of comments back to it later that, oh, that was my favorite part of the speech and things, so people are listening.
Yeah, no, it's extraordinary. I know at the Premier's Technology Council, we reformed it, and it's half women and half men, to quote a famous phrase, because it's 2017, oh no, it was 2015. But we wanted to achieve another balance as well, for example, an ethnic balance or an age balance, and it was extraordinarily difficult. But we persevered, and we have a fantastic council of 16 people now that really does represent a great cross-section of British Columbia. So back to the audience. There's a question right there. Oh, there's a microphone coming. There it is.
Thanks. Love your story, Shannon, by the way. That's fantastic for happening in BC. But you're still a big company, and I mean, Microsoft and EY are huge companies. What can we do, or what is being done to support all the small companies in BCTECH? And most of the companies are, 50 employees is big for a lot of the companies around here. They don't have HR departments. They don't have diversity of people. And it is still a old boys network out there. It is hard to, sort of get the support that you need. And so I'm wondering what we can do, or what you can do as a Premier's Technology Council, or what ACETECH can do, or what BCTIA can do, or, or how do we help them, make the rest of our mostly male CEOs aware, but support them? Because I think it's easy to bitch about it, but how can we really be supportive so we can all make a difference? Any ideas?
Well, for me, it always has to be front of mind. Last year I organized a summit, right? This year I didn't have to do it, yay. But I set a goal for the staff that we want 70% speakers on the panels and all that sort of stuff. So you actively have to pursue it. Now, we didn't get there because of various reasons. It's just slightly under 50. But in an industry like technology, that's actually staggering to have achieved that. But once again, you have to be aware of it. So training and education, certainly in the accelerator programs, actually that's a good idea. Maybe they should be bringing this up in the accelerator programs. Wyle, you have a small company. Yeah. How would you look at this?
I don't know if I think it's leadership, right? Inclusive leadership brings diversity and makes diversity stick, right? I think if the leaders believe in that, naturally they will attract more women, more visible minorities, but if you start with a boys' club at the top, I really don't know how to solve that.
Our general counsel was explaining to her daughter, who was 13, that we were trying to get more women partners, and it was a long, slow, difficult haul. And so a 13-year-old daughter said, well, you can fix it by firing the men. so anyway, I don't really advocate that, by the way. But it is one route.
The only thing that I would add to that is that it starts from the leadership, but it has to be a priority across the board and permeate throughout the entire organization, especially when it comes down to hiring. Who is making the hiring decisions? It's those who are interviewing, it's hiring managers. If a company has a recruiter or a vendor that's doing the recruiting, those are the people that are turning the cogs in the wheel so that you're able to make smarter decisions that will increase your diversity. So priority for everyone, and you have to have actionable steps and the whole team mindset on board to prioritize and act on those objectives.
Just one thing to add. So studies show that diversity programs work in organizations only if the CEO was personally pushing for them.
Yeah.
Anyone else,
Yeah.
it might work, it might not, but if the CEO was not involved, and I have a story, one of our clients, the VP of HR took the CEO to an unconscious bias training, and he had no idea this exists. He thought we hire the best talent, we treat people equally, things are great. And it just changed his perspective, right? Yeah. And that just changed everything in the organization. Right.
And I think everybody here should I shouldn't should on you, should do the unconscious bias test. You just Google Harvard implicit bias, and you can test your biases on, the aged and women and minorities and stuff. And I have a mild bias against women working and a mild bias in favor of African Americans versus Caucasian Americans, completely at odds with my intention. And so it's really a good thing to understand your own bias, because otherwise, you think that you're a rational person with emotions when in fact you're an emotional person who can rationalize. So, and if you kind of accept that, then you're halfway there. And for the question about the small
we have to
companies,
actually,
we have to shut up?
Well, I have to do my job, and they're going to fire me.
Oh, okay.
But look, we're going to be up at the front So we're very happy to meet up. I would like to thank the panelists. So thank you very much for coming, traveling here.